thinking that, like the show Saturday Night Live, you get your 5 timers jacket. So I think this is probably more than 5 times.
No, so what do I do?
So we have a golden sandwich for Jason. This was specially made for him. And we have another 5 timer in the room. So this is for Richard Beatty, who's our another 5-time.
It's more like 8 or 9.
It probably is at this point, but it's, you know, it's the nature of the sandwich. So here we go. Congratulations and thank you.
It's not edible.
No, it's not edible, so do try not to eat it. So, thank you for coming today. Many thanks to our friends at the library for sponsoring this program. We were just talking, we just got a brand new video camera that we're not using yet, but we'll be using it for future series, so that's exciting. If you didn't know, you can see all of our past programs on our YouTube page. So hopefully we'll have better quality ones for you in the future. But thank you, a huge thank you to our friends, to the committee. This has been a great series and I've enjoyed attending. So please, again, if you haven't entered for the door prize, be sure to do that. Today's prize is to Harrington's, and there's cookies, coffee, tea, all that good stuff. So today's presenter is Jason Smith. So many of you probably know him already. Jason is the superintendent for the Batavia City School District and most recently the city historian for the city of Batavia. So Jason is a 1990 graduate of Batavia High School, and his first job was as a page here at the library. So he received his BA in history from Geneseo and his master's in education, and education administration from Rockport. Jason is a member and the general manager for the Batavia Concert Band and serves as faith formation director and catechist for Resurrection Parish, and is also a member of the Genesee Valley Wind Ensemble in Kiwanis. Jason and his wife Lori enjoy taking cruises with friends and their children Megan, Matthew, and Madeline. He also has 2 dogs, Cooper and Carol. He enjoys running, bird watching, movies, and the Buffalo Bills. Jason is passionate about history and is pleased to present this book as his 6th review, so maybe we'll just Sharpie it in on here for number 6. Since 2013, so we've been very often grateful to have Jason as a presenter, and we're happy to have him here today. So thank you.
So Sam and I have had a long-standing joke. I'm a fan of Saturday Night Live. And if you watch Saturday Night Live, if you hosted the show 5 times, they've been giving you 5 times the check. I keep asking Sam, once he gets to 5, can I get my 5 times the check? So this is great though. So, you know, my secretary actually made one for me. She went on AI and found an old suede jacket and put me in it with my 5 times. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. This was a book that I read within the last month or so, and this is the final of the series on the Bicentennial. So I thought I'd start with just, I was only 4 and a half when the Bicentennial occurred, so I had no memory of it other than what I read and seen. So I thought I would just ask you, what are some memories that you recall of the Bicentennial in 1976? I was too young to have any memories, but anybody share anything that stands out and perhaps that you might be tying into the book here? Randy? All right, go ahead.
That was the year that I went to Oregon, and in July, and that 4th of July was sitting on the Friends roof watching fireworks.
Fireworks is a common theme in the book.
I was working for the city of Batavia at the time, and Brenda Emmons, who was the secretary to Ira Gates, all year long she had stuff in her office and to celebrate the
Stuff.
And on the last day before the 4th of July, she had a cake made, a birthday cake, Happy Birthday America in red,
We
white.
talk about birthday cakes in the book.
So that's a memory that I always think of, yeah.
I got this one. I was in New Hampshire at the time. I just moved up from Florida. Of course, it was a campaign summer.
Right.
And Jimmy Carter flew into our local airport where I actually worked on the perimeter road, so we got to see Jimmy Carter, you know, at the start of his campaign. Successful campaign at that, thanks in part to Hunter S. Thompson. So read That's true.
Yes, indeed.
I was a teenager, I just got out of high school, so I remember our family got together with relatives and sat outside and watched fireworks and had a picnic
Yeah.
and just celebrated.
Ron, you were in Washington,
I
right?
was in DC at the Lincoln and Washington, about 1 million people. It was an unbelievably impressive day. There was so much fun. Never forget it.
I was a senior in college, and I was talking with my father, who was a school teacher, about the crass commercialization of the Bicentennial. My father was always interested in history. He said, you know, you're never going to see any of this stuff again. He said, if I were you, I would start collecting it, which I did. So I've got a bunch of stuff in my basement.
So you've all hit the main points in the book, right? John?
The tall ships.
Tall ships, I'm talking about that too. So you've all covered the main points, right? There were birthday cakes. There was a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about. There were fireworks. There were trips to Washington, D.C. And as I read the book, I'm looking at it, and if I had to give, looking back how we celebrated the Bicentennial in 1976, I might give ourselves maybe like a C+. It wasn't that good. And you'll see why here in a minute. There was lots of good efforts for it. And so I tried to think of an analogy that maybe I could recall where something was really hyped up and it didn't really turn out to be that much of an exciting thing in my lifetime. So I thought which event of mine was hyped up. I remember being at a meeting, I was warned I had to do X, Y, and Z because traffic's going to be huge, blah, 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 blah. Then it kind of came and went. And the analogy I thought of was this. Right? Remember all the stuff we had? It was a rainy, it was a very cloudy day. I was at my sister's home on Oakfield. We barely saw for half a second. I shut down school because I was advised by the county to shut down school. Traffic didn't be backlogged. Nothing ever happened, right? So that's my analogy in my lifetime of how I might tie the Bicentennial into now. It's hyped up, and as you see in the book, there was lots of planning happening for the Bicentennial. It started in 1970, and the planning for the eclipse started 2 or 3 years prior to it. I remember being at a meeting. We were advised to fix our school calendars, and then it kind of came and went, and we saw for half a second, and that was it, right? So that's how obviously I think the Bicentennial is important. I'm not knocking that. I think what the author's point is, perhaps we didn't do the best job of it. So I'm going to pass out some ads I found from the Batavia Daily News in 1976. And I have 2 sets here. First I have some articles. I'm going to keep them in 2 different piles. This packet here is how we celebrated here in Genesee County. We had typical things like parades and fireworks. And then on the other side, some of you mentioned all the stuff, right, that happened. So here's how we celebrated, and just at the cynical side of me. 1976, Agway Petroleum selling gas grills, right? Ed Arnold scrap process and march on over with the fife and drum band. And then we have, of course, make your icebox of frigid air, a salute to 1976. So I had 2 of the claims there, and here's the actual newspaper from the Daily News on July 2nd, 1976, because it fell on a Sunday. So July 4th, 76 fell on a Sunday. So that's the newspaper from here that came out. And as I walk through the presentation, you'll see the highs and lows of how we celebrated the Bicentennial. So Lawrence R. Samuel, the author of the book, he's a cultural historian, author, and consultant. He has a PhD in American Studies. And he writes for various magazines like Psychology Today, and he's written several books on American culture, history, and social behavior. I've not read any of his books. They do seem interesting to me. Other titles include The American Writer, Happiness in America, Love in America. So he writes in both books and journals. So we talked about this analogy. So his book begins with a quote from a movie called Dazed and Confused, made in 1993. And I was able to find the actual quote on YouTube. And this is how he begins the book, with this quote. This kind of gives you a sense as to what he's going to be talking about, what his main argument is. And just listen carefully. The premise is there's a teacher on the desk, the class is ending. It's right around the 4th of July, for the movie Dazed and Confused.
Hey guys, one more thing. Hey, this summer, you'll be inundated with all this American Bicentennial 4th of July brouhaha. Don't forget what you're celebrating, and that's the fact that a bunch of slave-owning, aristocratic white males didn't want to pay their taxes.
So you heard things like what? The first thing she said was all the brouhaha, right? So that was one piece. And then she talks quite a bit about the white slave owners who didn't want to pay their taxes, right? So this theme of how we celebrated the African Americans comes up as well. It comes out often throughout the book, as does the Native Americans. So there's this underlying tension, you know, between celebrating with fife and drum bands and three-cornered hats versus recognizing, you know, the good with the bad with what our country has done. And I'll talk more about that in just a minute. So there are 4 premises to the book, all right? The Bicentennial was less about history itself and more about how we identify as a nation. We talked about the politics, all the stuff that was sold, and I have some pictures of some of the stuff that was sold. Things you're not going to, I was shocked. And then all the social issues. Of course, in 1976, we're just coming off Watergate. All right, there's a lot of cynicism around because of Watergate. I was talking to a colleague of mine, and much like now, there's, you know, in 2026, there's still some of that cynicism present by the government now, and we're celebrating the, what's it called? Not the Bicentennial. It's this sesquicentennial, right? So there's some different similarities there. We had the oil crisis in the 70s. Vietnam is just ending, and then there was a good combination of genuine patriotism, myth making, and of course marketing. All these things happen at the same time. So perhaps it's best to start. This is a good little clip I found. I'm just going to let it speak for itself.
Special Sentinel, Maverick, and Mustang Sprint. That's red, white, and blue accent. Oh, let's strike. The upholstery, the carpeting, all colored teeth. Hey, fella, are you trying to say buy these sports because they're red, white, and blue? You figured that out all by yourself, did you?
So that was one of the ads that Ford ran. They were trying to sell these red, white, and blue cars. That's how the chapter 1 started, talking about the new spirit of 1976. And again, there's this tension between how we should recognize our country's history, the good and the bad, versus selling stuff, which is both a classic American piece of it. So then there were views from historians, right? And there were 2 groups. There was the American Historical Association. They wanted us to focus on education and scholarship. That speaks to my heart. Let's focus on education and scholarship, not spectacle and hoopla. There was this conflict. And then you had the Academy of Arts and Sciences. They wanted to have a focus on the problems of our country, a series of conversations. What's good about America, what's not good about America. Let's try to balance things out. So there was that conversation. So on July 4th, 1970, who was president then? Of course, Nixon. All right, so it was well before Watergate. So Nixon wants to have a day on July 4th to kind of preface for this. He calls it Honor America Day. Does anybody recall that? I wasn't even born. But he had Honor America Day. Does anybody know how it ended? That's how it ended. That kind of set the tone for what's going to come. So there's nude protesters, tear gas. Yeah, so that's how it all started. Nixon wanted to have the honor, the honor our country day, and ended with nude protesters and tear gas in Washington. Then there was a conflict, a wrestling match, literally between 3 cities. Anyone guess which the 3 cities were?
Philly.
is one, yes. Philadelphia is one.
Boston,
Boston's the second one.
New York.
No. Washington. Washington DC. Who should be the home of the Bicentennial? So there were tensions there between the mayors, between who's going to host what. Boston, Washington, and each had a valid argument, I would say, but there was some tension there. And then, as you heard in the opening segment I showed you, there was this tension around how are we going to recognize African Americans? And who's that person? Frederick Douglass. Okay. This is what Frederick Douglass said on July 4th, 1852. All right. He said, "What to the slave is the 4th of July?" This is what he says in 1852. "You boast of liberty as an unholy license. Your national greatness, swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciation of tyrants, brass fronted, your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, they're all thin veiled." Not what kind, but probably true. All right, so there's this conflict here between how we sort of recognize our country as a whole, and then looking at marginalized folks. So there was concerns. The ARBC, there was some concern with a group that Nixon formed, the ARBC, the American Revolutionary Bicentennial Commission. Only had one scholar, and lots of Nixon fans. Right? It's shocking. Right? There was lack of diversity. Then on the other side, we had the left, the new left radicals. Of course, they were called the People's Bicentennial, and they wanted no plastic Liberty Bells. They wanted us to really focus on the heavy stuff. And there was lots of comments there and concerns around who was going to be in this group. And then the author says, with such a paltry list over 5 years, was it any wonder that many people felt that the ARBC should be abolished? So as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, geez, they can't do anything right. Everything's falling apart. Nixon has issues with the honor of American Day, so other issues. And then he calls it the big birthday. This is all chapter 1. The big birthday bungalow. All right. The New York Times. What he does, he goes through and finds all these. He talks about Time Magazine, New York Times, all these magazines, all these things that went wrong. The Times says perhaps we're just too old for a birthday party. It's too complicated. Washington Post calls it a big birthday bungle and stated insipid failure. And of course, we're going to recognize things like, the Boston Tea Party. We're going to so Lipton Tea organized the Boston Tea Party. Lipton Tea, right, making money. Then we have pretzel sticks, of course, a fantastic way to celebrate. Pretzel sticks. And then we have, of course, Ford getting on the act by trying to sell new cars. So chapter 1 is really kind of a sad chapter because not much has happened. Now let's go back to our historian friends. Robert Webb from the American Historical Association. Almost everything so far has not been intellectually respected. And he calls it the old boys club. Right? So I'm going to read you a passage from here. Oh. They got, so here they're referring to the ARBC. They had been rebuffed by anything left or central left or even controversial, choosing instead to reach out to the likes of, here we go, the Miss America contest and the Orange Bowl parade of sponsors. In short, the ARBC merged public and private interests, perceiving the American people more as consumers than as citizens. Right? And then, just to give you another example of what else went wrong, in the state of Kentucky, they were making license plates in the prisons. People placed orders for these license plates. They placed 105, there was 100 orders placed for 105,000. or I'm sorry, 105,000 people placed an order, nobody received it. So it does get better. But he kind of lays out all the issues with it in 1976. And then, okay, then Nixon has enough. So what do we do when things get hesitant? We have to appoint a czar. Right? So Nixon appoints a czar. He appoints a czar, right? And it's a guy named Warner, who I think was Elizabeth Taylor's seventh husband. I think later on. So he appoints a czar. We're going to have a drug czar, all these czars we had. He's going to appoint a czar. Because Nixon, I guess to his credit, since things weren't going well, perhaps with the new protesters. The House and Senate, they did push back on this, so he appoints a czar. Meanwhile, the cities and states move on, and this is where things perhaps get a bit better. In Maine and Quebec, they have a Benedict Arnold trek. I know he was a traitor, but they did try to walk through and follow his path. And the Boston celebrated with Boston 200, and then the ARBC decided they would just help all communities. So here comes the federal government trying to help out, but they need more staff, right? So they need more staff. Then a guy by the name of Robert Hartwig writes a book called Bicentennial USA, and he pushes hard. Last time I made this about picnics, pageants, and parades. Let's just do more than picnics, pageants, and parades. Those are great, we talked about those before. Let's do more than picnics, pageants, and parades. So this is, I thought was exciting. He came up with a concept called the Bicentennial Cultural Exchange Program, which was an exchange program with students from Braintree, Massachusetts, and Philadelphia, where they would visit each other's historical sites. That's good, right? That's the kind of thing I think we should be doing. So that was a positive. Here's a picture of John Warner with his seventh wife there, Elizabeth Taylor. So then he appoints John Warner, former Navy Secretary, as the chair. It went from the ARBC to the ARBA. And here's where there's concerns, what he calls bicentennial kitsch, junk, right? So I'm going to just, the articles that I passed out speak to that. We're selling gas grills. So here's something that's written. If you're looking for money, the bicentennial can be the biggest bonanza in your lifetime. It's not too early to be thinking about how to cash in on the coming wave of patriotism, the likes of which we may not see for another 200 years. Every man, woman, and student will be a red, white, and blue prospect. Come the revolution, profits are sure to be fast, furious, and fantastic. And somebody mentioned here a birthday cake, right? So there was this is a picture of the birthday cake, all right? So they offered to have not one, but six birthday cakes, each weighing 200,000 pounds, to celebrate the American bicentennial, all right? 70,000 pounds of flour, 40,000 pounds of raisins, 20,000 pounds of pineapple, and goes on and on and on, all right? So they try to have the bicentennial cakes.
Brilliant.
Brilliant, yeah. And then again, even in our little community, we're selling gas grills and scrap, all those types of things happen as well. And then CBS decides to get serious, all right? So the media got in on it. And CBS had several, they call them bicentennial minutes. I was able to find one. They had 732 bicentennial minutes. I don't recall any of these, but perhaps some of you do. I actually found one online here. Walter Cronkite spearheaded this. Charlton Heston was involved. Jean Stapleton was involved from the show All in the Family. She played Abigail Adams, John Adams' wife. So here's one I found, bicentennial minute. This is with Dear McGaffey.
I'm Darren McGaffey. 200 years ago today, in the dark of night, small boats headed for a 12-acre island in Manhattan's harbor, which loyalists were using for a refuge. Lookouts had reported that men from British warships were fortifying the place, possibly as a jumping-off point for an attack on the city. Major William D. Hart and 200 American soldiers landed on the island soon after midnight. They found only 60 loyalist women and children. The men had escaped from British ships lying offshore. The frightened refugees weren't hurt, but raiders burned the buildings that had sheltered them. Now that island in New York Harbor would no longer serve as a way station for refugees from America. But years later, it would welcome those coming in. They'd know it as Bedloe's Island, site of the Statue of Liberty. I'm Darren McGavin, and that's the way it was.
Anybody recall those? Yeah. So they had 732 of those. I found one of those on YouTube. One of the pieces that's also mentioned, and I'll get to it later, I think, is there's a concern when showing these different segments. Are we only showing the white colonists fighting the British? Of course, there are more folks involved in the American Revolution than just white colonists, right? Black Americans were involved, Native Americans were involved, so there's this underlying mosaic over are we showing enough of what our country's about. This one here only showed the white colonists with the threefold hat on. So there was efforts were made to recognize the African American celebration overseas. They had a moving demonstration. You can see there's some recognizable figures in there. So there were efforts here and there throughout the bicentennial era to recognize the contributions of people of color. So that's positive. And then, anybody recall the Preamble Express train? You had Gerald Ford. So by this time, Gerald Ford's in office. So this was kind of exciting in a way. Ford now becomes more active. Nixon has resigned. Ford has become more active. So as part of this train, Ford has a copy of the Constitution, of George Washington's copy of the Constitution. He presented it to a guy named Donald Kendall. Do you know who Donald Kendall is? The CEO of Pepsi. Because Pepsi was the sponsor of the train. Of course. American way. So I was okay, we're going to get the Constitution, I'm excited. And it goes to Donald Kendall, who I never heard of him until now, the CEO of Pepsi. Pepsi sponsored the train. Then there's again this conflict between a bicentennial fever and this diverse, concern over the contributions of people of color. There's more concern around the role of minority involvement. There's articles in there in Essence magazine. William Patterson calls it a moral crisis for today. The white Americans have neither answers nor a remedy. The Native Americans finally start to play a role and begin documenting their culture at the time of the 1776. So there's some positive there. And then what's happening, it's kind of what's happening here now, right? We're doing our assessment kind of by ourselves. We're going to have our do-it-yourself bicentennial plan. So that actually happened. This was actually my favorite part of the story because it was finding some hope. There's families in Indiana reading American history as families. Pioneer-style crops with horses in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. There's a Ben Franklin cut replica in Northport, New York. There's an Indiana prison inmate who hand-carved a chess set featuring George and Martha Washington. So all that was positive. I enjoyed that part of the book the most because it really showed what we can do as a country when we think about it. And these are some stories that kind of came out with the bicentennial. Sticking with the academic, there are several books that were released at this time. Time magazine had a famous cover of George Washington. There were new biographies of revolutionary figures. There were bicentennial essays on the presidency. These are some of the books that were written around the time of the bicentennial. The one on the bottom right is about the Black defenders of America. So there's more effort again there to recognize other folks besides white colonists. So that's some positive there. Some new look at that. And then of course we're going to circle back to Disney, of course, had to get involved. I'm not anti-Disney, but of course Disney had to get involved, and they had a little parade in 1975, and here it is. I'm not going to show the whole thing, but of course Disney got involved. So you get the point, it's like 10 minutes long. And then, of course, the NFL, the other big monster in the country, got involved as well. So they celebrated the Bicentennial with a Hall of Fame game. And they had a Bicentennial essay contest, which I don't know how you would answer this, but the theme of the contest was the NFL's role in American history. And they gave like $10,000. So the NFL, the Shield got involved there, as did Disney, as did Pepsi. And this is, then there's some conversation around how we approach the signage of the Declaration of Independence. It's called a moral legacy. And this is my take on it. So there's a historian I follow. His bottom right, his name is Joseph Ellis. Perhaps some of you have heard of him. He's written a lot of books. Great guy. Listen to his podcast. And there's this conversation about whether we should recognize the founding fathers for who they are, or like vilify them for being slave owners. And Joe Ellis's approach is, and this is the approach I used to use with my students, and he talks about how children view their parents, and then in turn how we should view historical figures. So here's the analogy. When a child is 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, mom or dad, we're the best. Mom or dad can do nothing wrong. We love mom and dad, they're perfect, right? And that's how some of us like to view the founding father. We're not going to look at all the negative things that they did. What happens when the kids become teenagers? Mom and dad don't do anything, they're awful, awful. There's folks that have that view as well. George Washington, let's tear down all the monuments, all the statues, let's not name any schools after George Washington. There's that approach, how teenagers view mom and dad, right? They're just, mom and dad don't know anything, they're awful people. The answer, Joe Ellis says, and I agree, is we should view historical figures as adult children view their parents. We're all human. There's good and there's bad, right? There's good and there's bad, right? So that's how he argues, and I would argue that we should view our parents as adult children view themselves. They're not perfect, they're not terrible, they're just human, and that's what the conversation that happens here in this chapter as well. Of course, my mom, I still think my mom is 5 or 6, my mom's perfect, so Joe Ellis, that's what Joe Ellis says, not Jason Smith. I agree with Joe Ellis, but of course, my mom's perfect. I'm 5 or 6. But that's how Joe Ellis is saying we should view historical figures, and that's how I would argue we should view people like George Washington, Andrew Jackson. They did some horrible things. They did some good things too. We have to find a balance there.
Jay, were you taught, at your age, were you taught that George Washington couldn't tell a lie?
Yes, it was. He got shot down a cherry tree.
Yeah.
All that stuff, so then Washington, D.C., Ron said he went to Washington, D.C. They were making a special effort to attract tourists after a series of failed and overambitious efforts. So 27 million Americans actually went to Washington, D.C. to see all the fireworks. That was a positive. Then, of course, there were some cons. There was this concept called the Bicentennial Cruise on the SS United States, which was mothballed, so it never happened. Then there was a Miss Bicentennial contest. People could pay $15, and it never happened. So there are obviously some scams that happened. Then they tried having a contest called Slogans USA. Again, sorry for the typo, I should fix that. For Minutemen to Spacemen, America's like Frosted Flakes, it's great. I get mine out of the pot. So then, going back to the African American issues, they're basically, Father Lawrence Lucas wrote in the New York Amsterdam News, there's 3 ways that he recommended African Americans celebrate. All right, or 3 ways that can be approached with it. You can ignore it, you can go all in, or you can celebrate with some reservations. Probably the third approach is probably the best approach, and that's what he was recommending. So there's that concept. Then, of course, 1976 finally arrives. I pass out the newspaper. On the back of that is this proclamation that Gerald Ford writes about, and I'm just going to read you what I've highlighted on there. We are the richest nation in the world, rich in our resources, rich in our creativity, rich in our strength, and rich in our people. from our Native Americans, so he's making an effort there now to be more inclusive, to those who have come from every country on earth to share in the hope, the work, and the spirit of our republic. The challenges based on our forebears were not only to their physical capabilities, but also to their faith in the future. So Ford really, to its credit, is trying to make an effort here to get things straightened out and reinvigorate that spirit of America. Then, the National Humane Society has a contest. What is America's favorite bicentennial animal? I'm going to tell the answer, but I want to hear what your guesses are. Because he made me guess until he made us guess until he told us. So what do you think? What do you think some of the answers were? Possibilities were. America's favorite bicentennial animal.
Bald eagle.
Bald eagle.
Bald eagle. Any other
Bison.
guesses? Sorry.
The bison.
Bison. All good guesses. Any other guesses?
Well, Franklin wanted the turkey.
Right, I was gonna say the turkey.
Franklin wanted the
Franklin
turkey.
The turkey.
Yeah.
The turkey. Yeah.
Turkey vulture.
Vulture. Well, America's bicentennial, the favorite one? The horse.
Of course.
And then one of the magazines he cites is the Christian Science Monitor. A guy by the name of Clayton Jones comes up with this concept called Star Spangled Knickknacks. And there they are.
Just what I've always wanted.
Cherries, revolutionary cherries, toilet seat, of course. I couldn't find it, but they have a sandwich called the American Sandwich after Uncle Sam. I couldn't find a picture of that. Of course, a glass on the top right. And this is not an actual picture, but I'm sure my dad may or may not appreciate this. But they have red, white, and blue coffins. My mom remembers them selling red, white, and blue coffins, but they always sell red, white, and blue coffins. And then, of course, 7-Up. So you can see we go back and forth between the good and the bad, right? Or between the cheesy and the not cheesy. So this was an interesting concept. And then back to the serious stuff. This idea of inclusivity remained an issue. There were bicentennial broadcasts, as I mentioned, but every week it was about the white counts taking on the British. Of course, shows, I'm sure there were great shows, and good before my time, shows like Bonanza and Gunsmoke did not help the cause. They perpetuated those stories. And then Black History Month, which I did not know, was declared in 1976. So that's a positive that came out of it. Some of you mentioned fireworks, right? So this is a section called I can't tell you that one too. The KKK got in on it. Why not, right? So there was a KKK rally in Pulaski, Tennessee. All right, and this actually happened. And the founders said, we're going to have a wagon from just about every single state. It lasted one day. So nothing proud there. Then you all mentioned fireworks, right? So only in America, this is directly from the book. I'll let you read it. Right? So somebody mentioned fireworks. Only in America would this happen, where you have these concerns over the having more fireworks than the actual gun smoke itself during the war. And I think Ron said they were. I was talking to Ron last week. He said they were huge in Washington D.C. So yeah. Then somebody mentioned the tall ships. That actually was the signature event. So that was successful. They had the tall ships in New York City. I see some heads nodding. So that was a positive piece. Of course, I don't recall that, but that was a positive piece. And then on the day that actually happened, July 4th, 1976, I passed out the newspaper there. There were fireworks in D.C. Elton John, of course, got in on it. You can find that concert online. He performed in Philadelphia. And this is how Time magazine described the celebration. A culminating moment of raucous blowout compounded of Disneyland pageantry and kitsch from Time magazine. And Elton John dresses up as Uncle Sam. And on a more humbling note, this is actually something I'm going to share. They did have a naturalization ceremony at Monticello, right, where Homer Thomas Jefferson. I saw one of these myself. In 1996, I was studying at the University of Virginia on a 3-week trip. And I found my photo album, and I actually saw this, not this one, but I saw a naturalization ceremony, and the speaker was David McCullough. It's kind of honored to have that. So I'll let you see that. These are pictures I took on that day. You can just pass it around. So I saw that on July 4th on the steps of Monticello. Several citizens were sworn in that day. So I was able to see that, and that was kind of fun. And then the final thoughts, just to end with, these are some of my own thoughts. There weren't any enduring positive social reforms, but it did, he concludes, it did kind of fuel the Reagan era, which I do recall, lots of patriotism. Some of you may recall that Ronald Reagan, what Bruce Springsteen song did he used to play before he would come on? Anybody know? What Bruce Springsteen song when Reagan played? I'm talking about their patriotism.
Born in the USA.
Born in the USA. What do you know about the song by Bruce Springsteen? Born in the USA is not American patriotism song. It is not.
They still haven't figured that out.
They have not. It's not American. It's not American. It's not a song. It's a song about Vietnam. But Reagan would play that song. So the author says this kind of fueled the era of great patriotism. The New Yorker described it as tedious, the more tedious, than not even interesting. Right? Then, of course, Life magazine, if you follow Life magazine, clearly grander and more glorious than ever. Sounds like Life magazine. The National Urban League, a bust. And of course, Americans questioned the use of taxpayer dollars, $50 million. And then John Warner, one of Nixon's guys, called it a major turning point and thought America was born again. So that's how he concludes, and that's my presentation.
Everybody noticed Jason's tie.
Yeah, I brought the tie. Any questions or comments? So the Monticello books being passed around. Yeah, Bart?
It's interesting that coming out of that, you had mentioned it sort of ushered in the Reagan years, which coming out of the mid-'70s with the oil crisis and the gas shortage and all that stuff was occurring about this time as well.
Right, yep.
I never made the connection between I made the connection between the suffering, so to speak, that went with the oil crisis heading into the Reagan era, but I never realized that one facet of it was the energy from this that made people start wanting to make America what it used to be.
And Reagan had a way,
buying.
yeah, and Reagan had a way, he could sing a song of America.
Yeah.
Whether you liked his politics or not,
Yeah.
he truly had a gift, and that kind of, led into that, so.
And people were willing to pay the price.
Yes.
Very nice.
All right, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. We are going to do our door prize drawing, so just bear with me for one more second. I also do want to mention we have our budget vote coming up next Thursday, May 7th, from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So if you're a registered voter who resides in the City of Batavia School District, we invite you to come vote for that. We have 4 trustees candidates for 2 seats. And so all of the information is in these little brochures. They're out front at the cert desk, and then we also have copies of our proposed budget. So your support, just your vote, is appreciated either way. Well, not either way, but your vote is appreciated. Just be careful. And then we have program brochures for May over there. The day of the budget vote, we've got our book sale, which is always a popular event. We've got the Genesee Country Museum coming to do some 19th century games at 4 o'clock. So that's for all ages. So if you ever wanted to know what Wimmy Diddles is, you can come play that. And then we've got some events for the kids as well. So again, thank you to the committee for this great series. Thank you to Laura, the program coordinator. She's done a great job with this program. This program's older than I am, and it's just really exciting that we keep it going here at the library. So I'm going to have Jason pull our door prize winner. Pick the right one, Jason. Okay. Let's see. Rita Kuzma. Congratulations. I think Laura has the envelope, so we'll get that to you afterwards, okay? And thank you everybody for coming. Please have tea, cookies, all the good things, and hopefully we'll see you in September for our fall series.